For more, we can cross to Washington and speak to our correspondent, Ketavan Gorjestani. Ketavan, this phone call was just the latest in what's been a whirlwind of diplomacy. What more can you tell us about it and what it might mean for the situation on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, this call was, of course, the sign that there is close cooperation between the U.S. and the Ukrainians and the allies, because it comes, of course, a day after Joe Biden spoke to Russian President Volodymyr Putin. But if you look at the readout from the White House of this call with Zelensky, it's a pretty traditional readout talking about how the U.S. Really is committed to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, committed to that decisive response against Russia in case of an invasion or aggression against Ukraine. And of course, as you mentioned, the importance of diplomacy and deterrence in this situation. What is not mentioned in this readout, of course, is the recent disagreements between the U.S. and Ukraine when it comes to the likelihood of that Russian aggression, of that possible invasion. You heard yesterday Volodymyr Zelensky speaking in English, so directing his words to his Western allies, talking about how panic was the best friend of Ukraine's enemies, of course, hinting there at Russia and hinting at the so-called panic that he believes is coming from the Americans with all these announcements of evacuating personnel, asking Americans to leave within 48 hours, removing troops from Ukraine to put them elsewhere in Europe. All of that, he feels, is a panic. Meanwhile, you had the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, today doing the rounds of the Sunday shows on American TV, and he continued with that alarmist tone, continued talking about the imminence of a potential invasion, saying we are in the window, a window which he says includes the coming week before the end of the Olympics in Beijing. He insisted that essentially an attack from the Russians on Ukraine can happen at any time. So you're seeing a sort of a disagreement between how the Ukrainians see the situation on the ground. Zelensky, of course, trying to downplay the threat to try to keep his population calm. And on the other hand, on the other extreme, the Americans who are talking about possibility of aerial bombings and an attack on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv.